We are back with Chief Billy Goldfeder here. We're going to be talking about some important issues affecting the fire service here today. And one of the issues that I think is near and dear to all of us in the fire service across the United States and for that matter around the world is our important reliance on volunteer firefighters and the volunteer fire service that has supported this country for a long time. And I know many other countries have a very similar critical firefighting force that comes from an army of volunteers. And so for years, we've seen a decline in participation, and especially in different generations and how they interact with their local volunteer fire service. In my day, it was a pretty big expectation that people grew up and volunteered and were a part of that. And even at different parts of the family, my mother to this day is a volunteer for her local volunteer fire department auxiliary and big stuff for bake sales and holds the pancake breakfast on Memorial Day weekend. You know, these are the kinds of things that happen in the community I grew up in. And it's an expectation, and I know what's happening today is not the same as what was happening 30 years ago when I grew up in that department. And so this is really a big issue for us in the fire service, and I know probably nobody who knows more than this than Billy, so I just want to kind of get your insights on what's happening and what can we do about it.
Well, what's happening is society's become busy. We've become refocused, and I'm not saying it's good or bad. It is what it is. It's just the way it is. People are too busy with so many other things, with everything from computer-based, internet-based stuff like video games and all that, to sports, to church, to all that. And people just don't have time. I mean, the greatest commodity today is time. Mm-hmm. Even back in the old days, your dad would come home and he'd sit and read the paper for an hour. Nobody has time to do that anymore. In fact, that's kind of my dream. I was telling Terry and my friends recently that if anything, this whole pandemic has stopped a lot of my travel, and I actually have time to read a book and stuff. So I'm really, really enjoying this time at home with my wife and all the other stuff. But you know what? Your mom can bake all she wants. It's not going to pay for a $1.2 million ladder truck. So let's start there. And look, your mom should keep baking forever, because there's always hats and shirts and all kinds of things that can be bought for the firefighters. But number one, it's got to be understood in the communities that the volunteers are serving. The only thing the volunteers should be expected to do anymore is to respond to calls and train. That's it. They do not have time for fundraising. They do not have time for any of the other stuff that's expected. It is the only, think about this, it's the only public service, the only emergency service where the employees raise money to work for free. It really is not a model that's working very well in 2020. It is not at all unusual for communities to hear fire departments get toned out and get toned out and get toned out. And you know what? It's up to the leadership, whether it's the leadership of the fire department, the fire company, or the leadership of the community to make a change. Mm-hmm. Often, much of those changes can be made by the volunteers just doing business differently. For example, gone are the days where you should be responding from home every time the whistle blows. Now, you should be considering, all right, let's say we've got 25 or 30 members of our fire company. So every night from 6 to 6, 3 of us are rotating through a duty crew to ensure one engine's getting out right away, or 4 people or whatever. That guarantees the response, and it spreads it where everybody has to participate. Because as you know, most volunteer fire departments, you got the core group who's doing all the work, then you got the ones who show up for the meetings and meals, the t-shirts and the jackets, right? So it's got to make that change. Unfortunately, the leadership, not all, but the leadership in many volunteer fire departments are the old guys like myself who love to think about the old days, and we want to live the old days. We want to pretend things are the way they used to be. Well, they're not. When I do travel and when I do trainings and all that, I love to talk to the old timers. And if I want to hear them talk to me for a while, I say, so, has much changed since you joined here? And bam, grab a Coke, sit back and wait 2 hours because you're not going to get a word in edgewise. But yet you look at the fire department and they're essentially operating the same way. We all go home, somebody calls 911, a dispatcher pushes a button, the whistle blows, the pager blows, and we see who shows up. That's no way to operate anymore, unfortunately. And it doesn't work. It's not working. You'll get a couple pay. Oh, it's working here. Sure. But let's see about your call last Tuesday morning at 10:30 in the morning. How was that turnout? You see what I'm saying? So volunteer fire departments were formed to meet the need of a community. So use that as your template. are we meeting the need of the community today? If not, we need to make some changes. Duty crews, well, I'm a volunteer, you can't make me. You know what? We're going to throw you out then if you don't want to change. I don't know what to say. If as soon as people say they don't want to make changes in that scenario, then it's all, you're focusing on yourself. You're not focusing on the need of the community. So, and I can, again, this could be a whole nother discussion, but the whole volunteer issue is, are you dedicated to the community and want to serve or not? If you do, then you need to make some changes. And if those changes are enough, it may mean that you hire some career people. In many fire departments that have brought on career people, it's disastrous. But a whole other bunch of many fire departments that have brought on career people, it's worked out just fine. You just got to make sure you set it up and identify the right people. I mean, if you got a guy that hates volunteers, you probably don't want to hire him, and your volunteer fire department is a paid guy, right? You know, you sense there. But it can work when there's some intelligence, when there's some policy, when there's some procedure, and when there's a focus on the template of two things: what's best for the community and what's best for the firefighters. That template has never failed me in my entire career. So that's the volunteer issue is, one, stop having to do fundraising. If you live in a community that's never had to pay for fire service, it's time to ante up. These people should not be expected to do fundraising and turkey dinners and boot drives and all that crap. That needs to be tax-based service, and then allow them when they, and respect their time. Don't expect the same amount of people to run all the calls at the same time. And especially also when it comes to training, make sure you have quality training. Do not waste their time. So it's very challenging. I wish I was optimistic. I'm not. I'm not at all optimistic about where it's going. But I'm hoping that'll turn around. But they got to make major changes.
Are there things that folks can do to, I don't know, create more incentive or motivation for people to volunteer? I mean, when we were growing up, I mean, you know, I'm a kid of the 60s and 70s. You know, back then we didn't have the internet, we didn't have computers, we played outside, we played, you know, we were firefighters, we were cops, we were whatever, right? You know, this is what we did. And it was really looked at as a very noble and exciting, you know, endeavor. And people wanted to join and participate. You know, as you said, times are different today. How do you create that motivation for the community to say, come out and do this? This is you know, fulfilling. This is important. This is something you're going to enjoy. This is going to, you know, it's going to be great for the community.
So near where you live is probably one of the best case studies I've ever used, and that's in the Ashford Volunteer Fire Department in Loudoun County, Virginia. Mm-hmm. Ashford was a farming community. In 90 or 87, they maybe did 50, 60 calls a year. It was the same old timers that did it. And suddenly all these influx of Yankees were moving into town. And they made a very, very conscientious decision to welcome these people as opposed to not welcome these newcomers. Mm-hmm. And when you come to a new town from outside, you are thirsty for wanting to become involved in that community. Many volunteer fire departments, the biggest problem in the volunteer department is the department themselves. They're not welcoming people. They may put a sign out that says welcoming new members, but bullshit. So many of them are not welcoming new members. They get there, you're not responding to their questions quick enough. You're not processing their application quick enough. You're losing their interest. There's no formal process of indoctrination. There's no process of training. And again, there's many others, but Ashburn has a system. There's a system. It's a machine. They know how to process. You're assigned a mentor. You're riding the trucks quickly, just as an observer. So you get that rush, that feeling, that excitement of being part of. You get a shirt. It's a red one or whatever color it is for Proby, but it has a logo. So you're now feeling a part. They're bringing you in. And that's what has to happen. And I always was impressed by that, because those old timers could have said, screw it, we don't want to. And these were farmers. These were guys who worked the land, and when the whistle blew, responded. And suddenly all this growth is happening around them. And they're like, why don't we welcome these people? What? And they did. And man, I think they have like 250 members. And it's a very, very active crew. Now, during the day, they got paid people that are provided by the county, But at night, it's the engine is staffed, the ladder staffed,
It's all volunteers.
yeah. Yeah. So how bad you want to do something is the answer to how you do it. And it really has to be about willing to make that change. Some places say, well, we'll start paying our volunteers. I don't see a whole lot of history of that working. I see volunteer departments that do part-time paid people, and they still have trouble getting out. I think it's more about what I can get out of this. And I don't mean for me as from a selfish standpoint, but feeling really good being a part of. I'm on the Tuesday night duty crew. We have the same crew every Tuesday night. There's 12 or 14 of us. We eat together. We train together. We respond on runs. And I'm psyched about being part of that duty crew. I think that's the way to do it.
To your point, being a part of a great team is what people are looking for. And
Yeah.
I think that camaraderie with your fellow brothers and sisters that you're responding with, and having that ability that you are a team that are in a life-threatening situation sometimes it's an everyday situation, but you know you can count on those people to be there and have your back, and you train together and you work together every Tuesday, you eat together. That's a huge part of it. And I remember, my crews, I mean, if I was working with Leroy Fernandez, the dude could cook like no tomorrow, and all we did was make sure he was supplied with the right ingredients, and we had amazing breakfast, lunches, and dinners. And that was part of being on Leroy's crew, was you knew you were going to eat amazingly well. That's stuff you remember 25 years later. You don't forget that. I mean,
Dude, that absolutely sticks with you, and that's such a big deal. Being a part of is a big deal. And, you say, well, let's start paying them $5 a call. Well, look around your community. Do those people need $5 a call? In most cases, they probably don't. That's not going to make a whole lot of
change it.
But if you give me a schedule or a system that I can function in, if my time is precious to you, in other words, drill night, we're not going to get there and stand around for 20 minutes figuring out what we're going to do. There's a plan, there's training, all that stuff. If you tell me that at the end of 6 months I'm going to have a review, give me my review. If at the end of your review it's positive, you get a new helmet front piece, give me the front piece. Things like that I think is what keep people going. And again, the organization has got to be willing to change. We can't keep operating the way we did.
You hit on an important thing there too. It's about communication. It's about recognition. It's about the right equipment. It's about the right tools. It's about the right training. And that goes whether it's a paid department or a volunteer department, it doesn't make any difference. And doing that well is what's going to keep your crews happy and engaged and so forth. One of the questions we ask all of our guests, and so I'm going to ask you as well, is that we want to know if there's any kind of technology that if you could invent or if you could have, it may exist today, it may not exist today, that would truly help the fire service, not about recruitment, but just in general, responding to fires, everyday issues, and even communications. I think about volunteers and communications. The way that volunteers should communicate today is very different. It's not necessarily the siren. It's not necessarily the pager, not the old voice pagers of the old Minitors and other things that we used to use. Yes, they're still out there, but the reality is there's technology today that can make a big difference. What technology do you want, or what technology did you wish we could have that would continue to help the fire service grow and be able to equip our firefighters with the right tools? So,
again, focusing on my primary responsibility in my fire department right now is, as far as emergency response, is I'm assigned normally a division. Rarely will I have command, only because our on-duty captain is going to usually pick that up and manage that incident the way or the on-duty battalion. So I'm usually Alpha, Charlie, one of those divisions, and I love that. That's absolutely what I want to do. I continue, and we get plenty of firefighters on a fire. Tracking them has got to be easier for me. And I'm not just talking about finding them inside the building, because everybody's waiting to figure that out. I mean, we're all an inch away from figuring out the answer to that. If somebody's lost in a building, I'm not as much worried about that. I'm more worried about who's on deck, engine 3. And if I could just sit here and go like that, this is engine 3, I got them. Engine 5, I got them. Something like that. Again, we'll get 4, 5, 6 engines, 2 or 3 trucks at a fire. And I don't have an aide standing next to me to track the companies, but I still feel deeply responsible, as I am, for those people. Not real comfortable taking a pad of paper and writing each company down, although I've done that on a more significant incident. but just something that easily, and I don't know what the answer is. I mean, like in my department, you have a Velcro front piece that patches on the front of your helmet and it tells you what rig you're riding on, if you remember to do that. Or if a neighboring department decides they don't want to do that, and how do I track them? So, and again, there's 100 other technology issues out there. But, I mean, I just something for us to track them in and out. But I know most of the technology people are focused on tracking them inside a building. That's fine. But I don't need that as much as I just want to generally know who's operating right now. Because I know where I sent them. And generally in our area, we're dealing with some pretty disciplined companies. If I send engine 287 up to the second floor, I promise you they're on the second floor until they're done with their assignment. So something like that. I also, and if it was a dream, it would be some sort of device that lets us know that flashover is impending. Immediate rise in temperature notification. Not me as much as those operating inside. Shit, I'm outside. I'm pretty safe out there, but it's all my kids that I have inside that building. Something that now the educational people would say, well, they should be able to watch for the signs and know. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying get rid of the training, but you know what? On that fire, I had a fire last weekend, and on the first alarm assignment, I had a firefighter whose first day was on the job, and I had a firefighter with 30 years on the job. So who's going to be where at the time? I don't know. And that's how it is everywhere. It's, everybody's got to have a first day sometime, right? And it was this firefighter's first day. If would that firefighter know the indications of a flashover? No, absolutely not. Would that firefighter's captain know? I would hope so. Would me and the officers outside know to look for certain things in the smoke? Absolutely. But man, technology could be pretty cool that way. And then there's the other obvious stuff, managing traffic, getting us there quickly, all that kind of stuff. But we got a lot of good technology, but thermal imager is no good if you leave it on the truck. I mean, that's the other end of that too. So.
You brought up some great points there. I mean, I think sensors, especially now that we're more connected, and having the ability for a temperature sensor to let you know that the temperature is rising greatly on a particular firefighter where they happen to be in a home is going to give you that insight that you just don't have today. I think having the ability for a better location is something we all know people have been working on, Z-axis and good accountability. Your point on situational awareness, though, I think is probably one of the most important ones, and we're seeing this kind of across the country and around the world. That better situational awareness of where arriving engine companies are coming from, where medic crews are at, where other assets are at, and across police, fire, EMS jurisdictions. Even on a large accident scene, you could have a Greyhound bus rollover, and you still need to understand where all your assets are. No different than if you're at a major fire scene. And this ability to have a better view of the insight of that when everybody's connected, everybody has a smartphone, everybody has the ability to know where different assets and resources are at. Who's a hazmat technician versus a paramedic versus an EMT? Knowing this kind of stuff in real time is something I think every incident commander, every leader in the fire service, would love to have at their fingertips and be able to pull up in a moment's notice in a way that you can digest quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing pretty well now, and I, speaking for my world, I think though, being involved with some of the NIOSH investigations and some of the other bad stuff that's happened in close calls, we really do need some help, and we go back to the in the career department, you should be a little bit more expected to meet certain abilities. And unfortunately, in volunteer fire departments, there's some communities where the whistle goes off. And today you may get 3 65-year-olds and a 17-year-old. Well, can we do, I mean, people would say, well, they shouldn't be going to fires. Well, that's great, but they are. So now what can we do to help them be more effective at that fire? I don't know. There's a whole lot out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's interesting, and it's a couple key points. First is a lot of what you have described in terms of technology exists today. I mean, in different pieces it exists today. So I think one of the issues, and we've talked to a lot of folks, both in industry and in different agencies. So, I think it's really important for agencies as part of their ongoing operations to be exploring the available technologies, but not just exploring what's, for sale and taking a sales demo or a call, but communicating the need, right? saying, this is the application, this is the use case we really want. And making sure that that is known and that industry understands that, because, we work with a lot of folks in industry and they're regularly coming to us asking us for, is this the right use case? We want to make something that's going to be useful and usable in public safety. And a lot of these new companies don't have a big, long history serving public safety, and the firefighter service. I mean, they're tech companies and they've been in enterprise or otherwise. And now that you've got platforms like FirstNet and you've got broadband connectivity, there's more and more opportunity for these companies to serve. So I think, that's one piece of it. And then relating back to a conversation we had earlier, not only about volunteers, but about career and making the fire service a career, especially with the new generation, this new tech has got to help, right? Giving them the right tools. They're growing up with it. They're using smartphones. They understand it. They won't have to rely on a 30-year-old, radio technology when all they do is use broadband and situational awareness and internet and video gaming and all of these things that now can be integrated into, their actual operations at the fire service. So I think also from a recruitment perspective.
But do it so they can afford it. I mean,
That's right.
I'm a huge Motorola fan, but whatever radio number is, it tells you the price. If it's an FCS 6000, it's $6,000.
Right.
The 10,000 is going to be out any day. And I guess from a business standpoint, they figure if we build it, they will come, I guess. But geez, what about the place where your mom volunteers and makes turkey dinners and that fire department's doing fundraising? How the hell are they going to afford some of this stuff? And again, maybe it needs to be local government and things like that. And technology often finds a way. You know what I mean? I remember as a young man, Texas Instrument calculators for $80. And within a few years, they were $8 and it was a better calculator, right? So there's ways to make it work, but it needs to be simple. Right now, you walk on your typical fire truck right now, we got like 9 or 10 things charging. This battery lasts 30 days. This battery, we got to change it. Half the time, the shit's dead. I hate to tell you. It just isn't working right, okay? Come up with one system where once a year, every first of the year, we got to change every battery. And I know that's, but you're asking for fantasy shit, right? So I'm trying to do that to you.
Good. This is good.
That's good advice.
That's kind of what we need is less focus on worrying about all this stuff and more focus on us being able to do the job. I'm checking my radio, I'm checking my thermal imager, I'm checking my mobile data terminal, I'm checking the flashlights, and there's 8 or 10 of those. And whoa, man, and is it any wonder when half the time you pick some up, it's dead? So, and not my fire department. Little asterisk there. Our shit works.
Absolutely. But it's a call to industry, and we've been doing this. We're living this, and you've just done it, which is, they've got to respond to those needs. They got to make it simple. They got to make it cost effective, and it's getting there. I mean, I think when you talk about legacy radio, that's one of the big reasons why it's not going to continue on, forever. Yes, it's an important tool that exists today, but it costs a fortune. It's got limited functionality. We need to migrate to technologies that are easy to use, that are cost effective, cheap, can be, tech refresh, can be updated.
We talk about this if I'm not going inside the building, which is 99% of the time, I'm a supervisor of a division. Do I need a $9,000 portable? Can you give me an app where I can just use this and talk on that channel? I don't know. I mean, I understand there's NFPA standards and all this. That's great. Figure it out. But there probably's got to be a better way. And because I guarantee I'm charging this every night. Because
Absolutely.
you're on it. My family's on it,
Well, and you use it every day. I mean, it's a critical part
Yes.
of your life every day. And the push to talk over cellular tools we have today are light years ahead of what we had 5 years ago. And the technology continues to change. I think the most important thing is the lesson that it needs to be cost effective. It needs to be with you. It's no different than, many years ago, many of us were probably not very good photographers because we never carried a camera. But now that we carry
my gosh.
it in our pocket, we can all of a sudden be an amateur photographer and we take a lot of pictures, probably 10,000 pictures on that phone right now, right? So,
Yeah.
So, it's about having the right tool at the right time in the right place. That's important, not just the most fancy tool or the most expensive tool.
And we really are. We're simple people. I mean, you're going to run into techno geeks on the job from time to time, but we just need stuff that's simple to operate. I remember I was involved in FEMA gave out a grant, or DHS gave out a grant for like $10 million to a big company on firefighter tracking. So I put some time into trying to help them out, and ended up at the Worcester Polytech conferences and all that. I'll never forget this group. They came out. They said, all right, when you pull up with your fire truck, you set up this antenna, and then somebody needs to put a tripod on each side of the four sides of the building. Like, hey, shit, the building burned down already.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Not gonna happen.
but you know what though? They were trying, and and that's probably 8-10 years ago now. And there's other stuff coming up. And again, though, it just needs to be simple for us. We are simple people. The more complicated, the less it's going to work.
Yeah, well said.
Absolutely.
Hey, to finish off our conversation today, I'd love to have you just tell us a little bit about your latest book. And you've been a prolific author and well followed here in the fire service. Could you tell us a little bit about it and just a few of the high level insights of some of the great people you talked to?
So I'm not a prolific author. I just have a lot of friends who I got to do all the writing for me. I just was using my book to hold the computer up. So here it is. And this is Pass It On. The third book. There were two others. They're still available. As a matter of fact, if you go to Fire Engineering Books right now, they have a special. I think this book is $45 or $49 or whatever. And it's, I mean, this thing is 500 something pages, right? It's loads of information, but they got a special right now for like $90. You get all three books. So if you want to buy one for every employees, I think that I would suggest you do that for your people.
Who's that on the cover, by the way?
I'm going to show you the better part, and that's the back cover. And look, we've got in this book some people that have the U.S. Fire Administrator Keith Bryant's in there, Steve Chikarotis, who's a very highly decorated fire chief in Chicago, but he's also the executive producer of Chicago Fire, and he was one of the producers for Backdraft. So he provides some insight in his experience. Denny Compton, Dan DeGrace, another is retired out of Chicago. Dan is a mental health expert. He writes in there. Chief DiBernardo, Joey DiBernardo, Chief D's son, was killed on following Black Sunday. You hear Chief DiBernardo. You hear from the Downey brothers who lost their dad on 9/11. Mike Dugan. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Lori Moore Merrill, all the way to a fire chief in rural Wisconsin who I met and thought she was just running one of the coolest fire departments ever. So we gave her a chapter in there. John Salka, Rick Lasky, Eric Roden. I mean, it just goes on and on. And we don't make a nickel on this. There's no money. Penwell, the people who fire engineering books, obviously, they got to print the thing. But I have not taken a nickel on any of three of these books, and we've donated tens of thousands of dollars to three charities. The National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, and the Chief Ray Downey Scholarship Fund. So if you've got any interest at all, if you honestly, especially to you people who are involved in providing us with stuff, but you're not necessarily firefighters, get the books, man, and read them. And again, you're going to learn from people who've been there, people who've gone through some horrible, horrible situations. Everything from technology to volunteers, to career, to union issues. I mean, just Tommy Richardson, who's the FDNY Chief of Operation, wrote a whole chapter in there, and you get his advice. You're not going to have a chance to meet Tommy Richardson if you're from Idaho or somewhere else. It just isn't going to work out that way. But yet you get, 20 minutes, a half hour of listening to Tommy's advice. I just can't emphasize enough how great the series has been. This is the final one. I just decided that's it, 3 books trilogy, right? We can have a little series here. Working on some new ideas and stuff that we'll come out with probably next year. But the idea came up, and I'll just lead into that. The idea came up. I've been very blessed with an amazing career. And I've been asked by the folks at Fire Engineering Books to write a book over the years. And honestly, I didn't think anybody needed another book on how to cut a hole in the roof or stretch a hose or command a fire. Those books have been written by people who are a lot better at that than I am. But I thought, what do I have to offer? Well, I know a lot of people. I've been around long enough and been involved in a lot where I can pretty much reach out to anybody. So I was on an airplane one day and I was reading a magazine called Esquire. And Esquire every month features somebody where they have a section. It's basically what I know. It's basically a story. And I was reading the one by Robert I'm sorry, not Robert Duvall, but Robert
Redford?
Oh no! See, you're showing your age. From Goodfellas.
De Niro.
Robert De Niro. There you go. That's the one I was reading. That's right. Here's Robert De Niro providing all this advice on life to people. I said, that's the book. And I reached out to lots of people, and Benwell said, oh, absolutely, or engineering, they want to do the book and all that stuff. We did it, and honestly, it's just a crazy success in the fire book world, if you will. So, real proud of it.
It's fantastic work you're doing, and all I can tell you is I've started book one, and literally from the first paragraph, I've been riveted by the stories, and I just can't wait to get through all of it. I highly recommend it. I think you're spot on, especially someone like me. I haven't been in the fire service, but work around it and work in technology, and tremendous insight. So and great work you're doing with the charities. It's really phenomenal.
We really appreciate you coming on and sharing about the book and sharing about all of your knowledge with the fire service with our listeners out here today. We're glad we can help spread the word. And we do recommend that people listen, get involved, learn more, be a part of the solution, even in your own community. If you're just wondering what you can do, ask good questions about what response times are in your community. Who responds to my home when I have a fire? Do we have the appropriate staffing? These are great questions to city councilors and county commissioners and mayors and city managers and county managers, and get involved. I think it's an important part of being a part of your community and making sure you have the services you deserve.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks
Absolutely.
So
Thanks so much. All righty. And that'll wrap us up for this episode of PSN at Home. And everybody stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.